Another thing we've heard quite a lot, and really frankly experienced as we've talked to folks who've gone through this process of getting licensed, is that too much professional experience can actually create a problem for you. And Dawn, I'm kind of curious what you think about this and how you've observed this in your experience.
Yes, especially in the industry that I'm currently working in, there
Hmm.
is a certain way that the government does work. And most of the time, it doesn't really connect with real world experiences.
Hmm.
So, in studying for the exam, I really had to disconnect all of these years of experience to study for this exam. And in the beginning, when I was taking 3.0 and 4.0, it was very challenging for me to pass any of the exams because I've taken them all, but I didn't begin to pass them until I recognized, Dawn, you have to forget everything you do all day long and just study the material for the exam. And I really feel, as you're mentioning here, if I didn't have those 13, 18 years of experience in a certain topic, it would have been easier for me to make that shift. But
Hmm.
when you're day to day managing projects a certain way, doing drawings a certain way, putting packages together a certain way, it becomes challenging to just turn that off and just
Hmm.
study what's in a book,
Yeah.
because it's a disconnect for you. So if I was able to get in on this studying process earlier, I don't believe that would have been so challenging.
Yeah. Now that makes a lot of sense. Jorge, what are your thoughts here?
I agree. There's, having been working on architecture for 20 years, I've learned a lot, but not all of it is applicable to the exam. So there's definitely an amount of information that is specific to the exam. It's really a baseline, what NCARB is looking for. So you really need to study that material from the eyes of NCARB and what it is that they're asking you, and really just answer that question. Don't answer your opinion of that question. And I think that's where it can trip you up. However, I will say that having taken in some of the exams, there was a couple of, maybe I'll just say, very good educated guesses that probably saved me on a couple occasions of things that I did not anticipate. And having done projects of, let's say historic restoration nature, things of that, that I knew what the answers were on the ARE, and that was, purely based on experience. So I think there's a positive and a negative, but I would err on the side of just focus on what NCARB is looking for and don't provide your opinion of what you think the answer should be.
Yeah.
And stick to that.
That's interesting. Don, I wonder, maybe even in your coaching group that you're in with Black Spectacles, but also your experience taking the test. I know we've had a number of folks who, for example, they only worked on interior renovations of retail projects for 20 years, and then they step up to take the test, and suddenly, they've never drawn a wall section before, they've never, done a roof detail before, and this test is written from the perspective, as best as I know, from the perspective, or sort of as the core, like a commercial architecture project, sort of a mid-sized office building, in the suburbs or something. Have you observed people having problems in your coaching group as a result of having sort of uneven experience or too much experience, et cetera?
I believe so. Everyone in my coaching group is kind of in the same boat as me. They've been in the industry for like over 15 years working on their different projects, and then when they have to turn to focus on the study material, it's very different from what they've been doing on a regular basis. So we have people in our group who they do commercial, but it's very different from the commercial that NCARB is focused on these exams. So it is a shift. It's things that they need to study that they've never actually had to work on before. So that becomes a challenge for them to, like I said before, turn off what they've been doing on a regular basis and learn something that appears to be completely new for them, because that was not like the niche that they've been working on all these years. So maybe if we were 2 years in, it wouldn't be that difficult to shift, but 15, 20, 25 years, it becomes a challenge.
Yeah. So, I mean, I kind of feel like the message we're trying to send here is in a way, having some experience. And I think the NCARB, if whoever's listening to this, if you were to go to NCARB and download their, every year they do an annual report called NCARB by the Numbers. And there's a chart that I was just looking at this week, and it shows you the average pass rate based on how much experience you have. And there's a really interesting little like peak, I suppose. And it peaks at, I think, like 2 or 3 years of experience. So it's lower if you have less than that, and it's lower if you have more than that. So like that's kind of like the ideal target zone, which, by the way, that coincides with, remember, 5 years ago, before NCARB made a bunch of changes to when you're eligible and whatever, you had to wait basically 3 years and go through all of your AXP, formerly known as IDP, hours before you could take the test. So I feel like there was probably some logic to that. So I think the takeaway is about having some experience, but maybe as you move along, it can cause problems.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think if you're able to use your experience to your advantage on the exam, I think that's great, but it's definitely can be a little risky at times if you start to cross over into, well, this is how we've always done it kind of a thing. And
Right.
that's where you can get into trouble. So
Yeah.
I think the one thing that's ingrained in our coaching group, it's always read the question, understand what the question is looking for, and answer that. Don't focus on this is how my firm does it, et cetera, because that's where you get into trouble.
Yeah, NCARB doesn't care what your opinion is.
Right, exactly.